Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Sharpe Takes, a look at public education in Vermont. Today, I'm delighted to have as a guest the Executive Director of Campaign for Vermont, which has been analyzing and looking at various aspects of life in Vermont, legislation in Vermont, over a number of years. And today, we're going to talk about their proposal with regard to education transformation. And so, welcome, Ben. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Could you start us out explaining a little bit about Campaign for Vermont?
Sure. Yeah. So Campaign for Vermont is a nonprofit advocacy organization. Although we blend advocacy with think tank a little bit, there's some blurred lines there because we do some of our own research as well as advocating for policies we think promote the middle class in Vermont and help grow the middle class and the economy and help folks get ahead in our state.
Fantastic. And recently, you've made a proposal to the committee that's studying this summer on realigning district lines in the state.
Right.
And you have a plan that you've submitted to them. Can you explain that plan a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So we this really comes out of a number of years of working on education policy in Vermont, and you know, and research as well. In fact, we did a research project in 2014 that looked at the size and scale of districts in Vermont and where some of the cost drivers and also opportunities were in terms of scale. And we just redid that study last year. Basically redoing that 10-year-old study to see if the any of the factors had changed. And we found some interesting things, and that helped kind of inform this proposal that we brought forward to the legislature. And now we've reintroduced it to the Act 73 task force, which is responsible for coming up with what the new governance structures are going to look like in the state. And there's quite a bit of detail in the proposal, but the nuts and bolts of it are to align our governance structures with our career and technical education centers. And there's a number of reasons why that makes sense. But the two primary ones why CTEs are because to really help realign our secondary and post-secondary education systems is kind of the first important thing. And then the second one is funding. It's been funding career and technical education centers has been a problem in the state. Legislators have been looking at it for quite a while. And aligning them with a governance structure and then funding them through that governance structure helps alleviate some of the choke points in the funding system we have for CTEs today.
So I agree with you in terms of for 20 years I taught at Career Technical Center. I taught automotive technology, and there was a financial barrier for students to move from a traditional academic type high school, if you will, to a technical center for technical training. And I think it was part of the reason why a number of students didn't take advantage of career and technical education, and why we have a shortage of those tradespeople that we so
Absolutely.
desperately need in this state. So taking care of the roadblocks or knocking down some of those roadblocks would be, I think, an important step forward for the state and for students to be able to access career and technical fields. How does your plan break down those barriers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the financial aspect of it, right? Today we have a system for CTE where basically the money follows the student, right? And a lot of folks in the field have pointed to that as an inherent challenge because, if a high school is member of a CTE district and is going to send their student to a CTE, that money follows the student, and so there's sort of a financial disincentive, I think, that you were alluding to, where those schools don't want to see that money go out the door, even if that's the right place for the student to be, right?
Right.
And so paying for, in our proposal, we use the supervisory union as the mechanism to, the governance structure mechanism to align with the CTE. But if you're paying for that school, that CTE out of the SU budget, and that's just baked into your school budget, suddenly the financial incentive changes. And so it's no longer that money is following the student, it's that that school is already paying for CTE services through the supervisory union. So the incentive is to get their money's worth out of that investment, instead of, oh, we're going to lose X number of dollars if that student leaves our school and goes to a career setting.
So we used to have supervisory unions here in Addison County, and still there was the money following the student that went from Mount Abraham down to the technical center in Middlebury. If there was, you proposed to have one school district for the entire county, is that right?
Sort of. What we had proposed doing, and this is in some ways semantics, just depending on how you envision it. But what we had proposed doing is basically having one supervisory union per career technical education center district,
Right.
which roughly is one per county. It comes out to like 15 instead of 14, but pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a supervisory union for all of Addison County. I'm trying to picture this in my mind. You still have the three high schools and their school boards and their budgets, and you still have the the however many elementary schools. I think maybe 15 elementary schools and their budgets. Um, and someone from Mount Abe decides to go down to Middlebury, they're within the same SU, but how is that not money going out of Mount Abe to go?
Yeah, so because you would fund, the way that we envisioned this was that you would fund the Career and Technical Education Center, the CT Center, entirely out of the SU budget. So it's all of those, whatever the capacity is in that CTE, is paid for entirely out of the SU budget. And then there might be a situation where we have to make sure some sort of mechanism where not one district is taking all of the seats in that school. There's got to be some sort of mechanism to equalize that, probably. But that's more of a management agreement, I think, at the SU level with the individual districts. But the idea is that a school is paying, whatever their portion of the SU budget is accounting for the Career Technical Education Center. And so, they get X number of seats in that center that they're paying for through their SU budget, and it's not each individual student is an incremental cost. This is baked into your budget.
Okay, I think the devil's in the details. I don't
For
quite
sure.
understand it myself because you also support, I think, in your plan, the foundation formula, which is a per pupil amount out
Yes.
of the state education fund that goes to the supervisory union. You're saying it all so the let's pick round numbers because they're easy.
Yes.
$20,000 per student comes from the education fund to the supervisory union.
Yeah.
Now, how do they allocate money to the various schools?
Yeah. So, and that is, so that's, a good point, is that the way we had envisioned this future state, if we're marrying these governance changes to the foundation formula changes, is that the entry point for the state dollars coming in would be the SU level. So the money is already there, and it's actually kind of flowing in the reverse direction of what we were talking about. That's how it goes today, right? It goes from the district up in today's funding model. But in what we're contemplating, and again, this is not, this could change in whatever final form it takes, but the way we envisioned it is it enters at the SU level and then flows down to the school based on, which schools have changing enrollment, right? Because one of the things we see today is that those fluctuations at a building level in terms of enrollment really throw, administrators for a loop and taxpayers for a loop, because you have pretty dramatic fluctuations year to year. So if your entry point and your tax base is at the SU level, that helps to to alleviate some of those individual fluctuations at a building or a district level. And then once you actually get to the fall and see where the students are actually falling in your buildings, then those dollars flow down to that level based on what the needs are.
Okay. So, um, so you still have a number of school districts underneath this supervisory union,
Yeah.
right? And what if they want to spend more money, or do they decide their own budget? How does that work?
Yeah, and there was some disagreement. So we worked on this proposal with our advisory council, which is a group of folks that are subject matter experts in various things, education being one of them. And this was a point where there was a fair amount of disagreement about how much individual districts could choose to spend above the base education amount. This is also debated in the legislature too, by the way.
Yeah,
If like
sure. Yeah.
how much, how much above the base amount should individual districts be allowed to spend? And the way that we solved for that problem is that local districts still pass their own budgets, but if they're going to spend more than the base amount, that also has to be approved by the SU level, because it's ultimately, if those dollars are coming in from the SU, you have to have both parties agree to it.
So I'm trying to put this together because I think in lots of ways agree with the notion that you've put together. It's the details that really flummox me, to be honest. And so schools aren't going to know what they get for money until, I think you just said, the fall, when the students actually arrive. Then they get their disbursement from the SU.
Well, not exactly, because you're going to know based on the December letter what you're going to have a good approximation of what the base amount is going to be
Yeah.
almost a year prior, right?
Yeah.
So the December letter from the tax commissioner is going to say, here is the projected base amount for the year based on inflationary numbers. Again, in the foundation formula sphere, like
Hmm.
if that gets implemented, it would be December letter. You have a pretty good idea. The overall SU district budgets, the SU budget at least gets voted on town meeting day. And then in terms of like where those dollars actually end up, based on fluctuations in student counts, there may be tweaks on what funding is allocated to individual buildings, or what's more likely what staffing gets allocated to individual buildings throughout the summer, because you're not going to know your final enrollment until
Who's
at
going
some
to
point.
allocate the staffing?
That is going to have to be a decision between the principal and the superintendent and the school boards involved. They're going to have to
So the
sort that out.
SU is not going to be involved in moving a nurse from one building to another, or a librarian, or a third grade teacher, or whatever. That's going to be strictly at the school board level, at the school district level.
I think most staffing, and that's a good question. Most staffing decisions will probably still be made at the district level. But, one of the things that we contemplate is moving a bunch of things up to the SU level as contracted services. And this is one of the places we did see savings in Act 46 was contracted services. So pushing those up to the SU level, things like purchasing and special education's already at the SU level. But there's like could be a music or language or arts or any of those programs that's hard to sustain a program at an individual district level in many cases, and we see this now in the current environment. Is a lot of districts are cutting those services today
Yeah.
in response to financial pressure, and so moving those up to an SU level where you can have that staffing distributed around, and maybe it's a 2 day a week language class in one school, and that staffing can move around throughout the district if it's a service provided at the SU level. So I guess the short answer is some staffing, like primary teachers, will probably remain at the district level, but there's going to be these sort of management agreements or service contracts that will move other bits of staffing up to the SU level for some of those pieces that are just don't have the economies of scale
Yeah.
at a local level.
So my last guest mentioned that the New York and other states use a BOCES model for this type of collaboration, if you will, in a
Yeah.
larger. Is that something that you looked at or modeled after?
Yeah, and that is exactly the concept. So most states have what's called an education service agency. They all have different names, but the idea is that it's a regional service provider that provides services to districts in order to achieve economies of scale. And that could be purchasing, that could be special education services, it could be HR, it could be ARAP services. Like there's a range of different services that those ESAs provide. In Vermont, we call our ESAs supervisory unions. And it's the same exact structure operationally as a BOCES in New York. New York calls them BOCES, but it's the same structure.
I
And
see.
the interesting bit in Vermont is that we actually just created a new BOCES program a couple of years ago, or actually I think it was last year. So another layer on top of the SU. So we have two different education service providers in the same governance stack.
What's the new one
They call them BOCES after the New York
in
model
Vermont?
in Vermont.
Where did we create BOCES?
The so the legislation last year created the ability for districts to set up their own BOCES, like to work with each other to set up their own BOCES. So I'm not sure any have actually formed articles of agreement yet, but I know there's several conversations around the state of them forming. But it's interesting because that's what supervisory unions were supposed to do originally, and we've now just created. I joked at the time, like we're just creating supervisory unions in this process, but that's what SUs were supposed to be.
I see.
Is these service providers?
Fascinating. So, what am I missing? Got to look at my notes.
I think
Go ahead.
one of the things that's important and why we are talking about supervisory unions and ESAs or whatever we want to call them instead of districts is as soon as you start talking about districts and consolidation of districts, that also means giving up your local school board to some degree, right? And I think one of there's a range of like, at what scale does a school board member lose touch with the schools that they're responsible for, right? And and I think that's the biggest. We can continue to consolidate districts, but at what point do those school board members lose touch with the schools that they're responsible for? Because at a scale of like, I'm a school board member, let's just say for sake of argument, and I've got 5 or 6 schools that I'm responsible for, I can theoretically know what's going on in all of those schools, but you move up to a scale where even at the county level, where you may have like a dozen, 2 dozen schools,
Yeah.
very hard to know as a school board member what's actually going on in each one of those buildings.
Yeah.
And then you take it even further than that, like the governor proposed, and go to 5 regional boards. There's no way you're going to know what's going on in half of those schools.
Yeah.
So there's you lose something at a certain point. There's a tipping point where I think you start losing touch with what's happening on the ground. And the other important thing I think also from a parent's perspective, right, is if you have some sort of grievance the school is not addressing, your recourse is to take it to the school board. And at a certain point, if you have to drive 50 miles to get to your school board meeting and then get in line behind, and again, I'm picking on the governor's proposal a little bit here, but get in line behind 36,000 other parents, that's kind of prohibitive, right?
Yeah.
You start again, so parents start losing touch at a certain point too. Those families start losing touch with their local school governance. So there's I think we can, our theory is that you can get a lot of the efficiencies of scale by utilizing education service providers, whether we call them SUs, BOCES, whatever we call them. We can get a lot of those efficiencies of scale with that structure without losing that local control of schools through your local school board.
Yeah. Interesting. So one of the things about that's going on about this is this foundation formula amount that's a fixed amount let's say 20,000 per pupil for
Yeah.
every pupil in the state. Varied somewhat based on the weighting that we are currently using or some modification of it. So for low income students or for students English of a second language or special needs for would modify the the base amount.
Yeah. Yep.
So Addison County is close to Burlington. Um, we always say it's really nice Burlington is close to Vermont.
Yes. Yeah. As a Burlington resident, I understand. Yeah.
So our salaries in Addison County in order to compete to keep teachers in Addison County,
Yeah.
we pay significantly more than other areas of the state. And yet, under I think almost everybody's formula that I've heard, there's no accommodation for the fact that salaries are more, and let's face it, 80%, give or take, is the cost of education, right?
Yes.
Is salaries.
Yes.
So once you take away the ability for regions to compete on a salary basis, doesn't that create a fundamental flaw here?
It is a fundamental flaw, and it's something surprising that we've gone through three different weighting formula regimes at this point. There's going to be a fourth one whenever they're done working on the Act 73 changes. And none of them so far have accounted for salary or cost of living adjustments. And that is, when you think about equalization, right? 80% of your cost is staffing. And if we're not paying attention to what the staffing cost differences are among different regions of the state, we're going to start creating problems in places like Addison County, Franklin County, and honestly, even Chittenden County in certain places, because we're seeing even in places like South Burlington and Essex, and to some extent Williston, these like suburban areas near city centers, they have relatively high wealth, high income. They have a relatively low number of English language learners. They are also the places that are seeing high housing cost pressures. So they're getting hit on, this is a whole nother topic, but CLAs,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
housing pressure in those places. And on the other side, the formula is disadvantaging them because all the things the formula is waiting for
Don't exist.
don't exist in those districts. And that,
Yeah.
I'm sure, plays out in Middlebury and some of the places here as well. And so they're getting hit on both sides. And you have these places that are cutting. And I have one of my good friends happens to be the chair of the Essex Westford School District. And they're in a situation where they're going to have cut $20 million over 3 years, and their average class size is going to be close to 30,
Yeah.
because they're getting hit from both sides, and they also have high wage pressure because they're in Chittenden County.
Right.
So like they either have to cut. The only option is to cut staffing, because if they cut salaries, they're not going to be able to hire anybody. So
Then how can we possibly think we're going to save money?
it's a great question. I think, we still, it is, the challenge we have is that there are 100 stories to be told across the state, because the experience is so different.
Yes, we're
From
culturally different, financially different.
The demographics are different.
Economically, tax-wise, we're different.
Tax bases are different. So
Yeah.
you have all of these voices, these different stories being told, and it's really hard to sort through what's actually happening at scale, right? Because you have all of these different things happening on the ground level, but what's happening from a statewide perspective, and where are the cost drivers, and it's a really difficult, nuanced conversation to have in the legislature, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
To have a nuanced conversation about, okay, what are the actual cost drivers in the system, because we have 100 different stories being told about what's happening in local communities.
So I was going to ask this question at the end of our conversation, but it's so appropriate right now. Is this you keep your eye on the legislature and the votes that have happened there? Is there any path forward? Is there any reason to believe that the speaker is going to be able to get a majority, or that the governor is going to sign whatever the speaker does get passed?
That is an excellent question and is absolutely the right one to be asking. And I think um, it's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be really hard. And I told this to Emily Kornheiser last week, who's the chair of the House Ways and Means
Yeah.
Committee. I said, I'm shocked you got this bill through in 1 year to begin with. I mean, just the scale of what you're talking about in this bill, I'm surprised they even got it through in 1 year. And it's
Yeah.
going to be really tough for this Act 73 task force to find consensus on whatever they're presenting to the legislature. And then it's going to be doubly hard for the legislature to agree on what to do with the recommendations from this task force. There is a path, but it's a very narrow path, I think, to finding consensus. The one thing everyone can agree on is the foundation formula. So it may just be at the end of the day, we end up with the foundation formula and nothing else. But
But
we'll see.
isn't that in some ways the Achilles heel of all these proposals, in that they don't account for the fact that wages are so different from
Yes.
district to district.
Yes.
And the foundation formula throws that out the window, doesn't it?
Well, it just doesn't have to if you do wait for like median area salary or something, some sort of number where you're tying in, cost of living adjustments for the local level. It doesn't have to throw all of it out the window. But if we just plugged in our existing weighting factors into the foundation formula, absolutely, it's going to cause problems. And one of the other things, and I disagreed with the legislature about this, but the foundation formula has an excess spending allowance. Like you can
Yeah.
spend above, but you can only spend 10% above. And that's not a lot of wiggle room if you're trying to, as a local district, trying to alleviate some sort
If
of,
you're in Essex,
if you're in
right?
Essex, and you're trying to alleviate some sort of inequality
Yeah.
in the weighting
Right.
factors. 10% is not a big window to
Right.
like try to overcome that with.
Yeah.
So like that's a significant challenge, and I've told legislators that I think they need to open that window up to allow districts, even if it's a 20% or 30% window, it's still 10 times better than our current, 10 times more equitable, I should say,
Yeah.
than our current situation.
So that a couple of questions jumped into my mind when you said that. So the weighting formula, you alluded to that maybe we add a new weight that is tied to the average household income or something like that.
Yeah, average wage, household income, something like that,
Yeah.
right? Where it's some sort of indicator of what the cost of talent acquisition is in
Yeah.
that district.
And then the other thing that came in my mind is, at least when I was in the legislature a number of years ago, there were some districts on the western border, right, with New York,
Yes.
that sent students across the border to Salem, maybe, or Granville. I don't recall specifically the names of the schools, but their tuition was like $5,000 because
Yes.
New York supports education primarily from the income side. It's one of the real conundrums for our state, is that we have New York on our western side that is income based in
In large
large
part,
part,
yes.
and we have on our eastern border we have New Hampshire that's property based in large part.
Almost exclusively.
And so, anytime you talk about something like education that we're going to do statewide, it stumbles on this. So
Yes.
we have communities on the western border of the state that are tuitioning kids using vouchers to at a $5,000 or $6,000 level.
Yes.
What are they going to do when they get $20,000?
That is a great question. No one has answered that yet. I don't have an answer, unfortunately, for what we do in those situations. But either to say to New York, like, hey, here's here's some extra money,
Yeah.
or you could do a carve out of some kind where you're like, okay, if you're tuitioning to a public school in a different state, match the tuition rate instead of you get the full base amount.
Yeah.
Like this is some sort of circuit breaker.
We do have cross-border issues on the eastern side that I'm not as educated about. I think two of them anyway are federally formed, and that throws a little bit of a monkey wrench in anything we try to do.
Exactly. Yeah, there's two interstate districts on the New Hampshire side of the border, which would require an act of Congress to change. So again, consolidation wise, that's a little bit of a tricky situation where if you're going to actually change the business entity, right, the district, you'd have to have an act of Congress to change it, which is a little bit of a challenge.
Especially, we're talking about a challenge of getting anything done at the state level. The challenge of getting anything done at the federal level is multiplied.
Yes, yeah, especially right now in our current environment,
Yeah.
it actually feels like we're getting more stuff done at the state to some degree now than we have in previous years.
Yeah.
And the exact opposite is happening at the federal level. So,
Which is
like,
making it more difficult for us to accomplish what we need to accomplish at the state
exactly.
level.
And especially in the education conversation, we're
Yeah.
getting dollars clawed back from the feds, and that's exacerbating the issues we have in our system because there's either a need to replace those dollars with state dollars or do something to accommodate for that.
Yeah. Well, we certainly have our challenges, and I want to thank you and the Campaign for Vermont for putting forward a thoughtful plan. I think it needs work from my perspective, but it's all going to go through the political process anyway.
Yeah, it's
There's
going
no
to go through the
such
meat
thing.
grinder.
Yes, no such thing as a perfect plan. If it were, it'd get all torn apart anyway. So.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for your work, and I think the analysis is helpful, and I hope the public gains some understanding. Um, that takes us to the end of today's interview, and I very much appreciate you listening. Stay tuned and check Campaign for Vermont out on website. They have a lot of information not just about education, but about other issues in Vermont. So thank you, Ben, for joining us.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Take care.
You too.
Want to be a guest on Sharpe Takes? Have an opinion you want Dave to hear about? Email davesharp@gmavt.net.